Okay. Hello, welcome back. Uh, I hope you guys have a nice break since it's a long way to go after this. We'll be um, covering functions, lambdas, expression, libraries, and finally we will be covering object-oriented programming in Python. Right. Okay. Right, so is everyone ready? So if you guys are ready, then can I have a ready in the chat? All right. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of readies. Right, so yes, let's go. Let's continue on to function. Right. So before we had our break, we stopped at while loops. So now we are moving on to functions. Right. So in in Python, how do we write a function is a bit different compared to other languages. Mainly because Python don't have it's a dynamically typed language. So the type in front of the like F like we have seen before, we don't have to specify the type of a variable. Same goes to the function. We don't need to specify the return type of the function since it will be determined during runtime, right? So for us to write a function, so the syntax goes like this. First we have def, right? Def stands for define def, right? Def, and then our function name. So function name, right? Put whatever you want, right? And then we need to have a parenthesis and then a colon, right? So def, then your function name. First we have def, then define, and then our function name, and then finally we have the parenthesis, right? Then your function bodies begins whenever you press enter at the end of the line. So you press enter, then it will be automatically indented. So when it is indented, then that means you are in your function body, right? So basically here you can do whatever you want in a function. You can return values, you can print something, you can do some operations, right? And yeah, and also for now let's just put a pass here. So pass basically do nothing, and since I'm not going to use this function called function name, I'm not going to use it, but I just want to show you how the syntax is. So I just put pass inside. And if I actually call this function, it won't do anything because the body is empty, right? Okay, now let's actually create a useful function. Okay, so let's create a function called print, or not print, print message, right? Or display message, in fact. So firstly, define, okay, def, display message, or in fact, just display, right? Then parentheses, and then colon, then enter, right? So what do we want to display actually? So we want to display, let's say, print, hi, how are you? Okay. And when we are done, we can run the cell. And let's try calling it down here. In order for us, okay, when we have created a function, then let's say down along the line, we want to use the function, we can call it by its name. Okay, in this case, the name is display. I can just display, and then don't forget the parentheses right after it. Display, and then the open and close parentheses. And I run the cell, and then it will display, hi, how are you? Okay, and in other languages, not in other languages. We usually use function as a method, as a way to like we give the function something as an input, and then we expect an output from it, right? So how do we actually achieve that is by, let's create another function called display2, right? And for now, the body is just let's not put anything first. And okay, let's say we pass in a name. Okay, so in where do we actually want to put that? Okay, let's write print I plus name. Okay? But in this case, the name here have to be passed through the function. But where does this name, where do we actually fetch this name from? So in Python function, when we want to pass something as an argument, okay, so we can put it inside the parentheses. We can put name, right? So what does this mean is, let me just, let me just add, okay, okay. So what does this function declaration means is basically saying that define a function named display2 that accept one argument. Okay, and then later when it is printing something, so print hi plus the name. Plus in this case when we have two strings, so the plus is actually concatenating the string. So basically joining two strings. Okay, so let's call this function now here. Let's put display2 and then right? Let's give this a run. So you can see hi Daniel because this is the value that I pass in, right? And okay, let's see what happened when we don't pass anything inside. So instead of just display to Daniel, now it's just display to and empty parenthesis. Then it will return an error because it expecting one argument given, but we didn't provide any. Okay, so how do we want to like prevent this from happening? So there's a thing called optional arguments. So yeah, it is called optional argument, and we'll see that later on, right? So this will be fixed by using optional arguments. Right. So for now, let's just have this thing first. Right. And yeah, let's say if we were to create a function that multiply whatever number that has been given with 2, right? Now we come to the return function, and to the return part of the functions. So let's say create a function named multiply by 2. Okay, we accept one number. Okay, so create a function named multiply by 2, which takes in one argument, which is number, right? So as you can see just now, this thing is printing something. Okay, it's not returning, it's printing something. Okay, so if we were to return something, then we need to store the return value inside a variable, or let's say, okay, let's just change this. Okay, instead of writing print, let's just return hi, how are you? Okay, instead of printing it. So give this a run. Yeah. Okay, as you can see here, because by default, it shouldn't be printing anything because by default, when you have a variable in Jupyter Notebook, you actually don't need the print function to actually print it. You don't need to have the print. But when you are printing multiple stuff, then you have to use the print function. So that's why it's still displaying this thing. Yeah. But then logically speaking, it is not printing anything, it's just returning this string. It's not printing. But now when I print something, then when I explicitly ask it to print, so what this instruction is, what this line of code is doing is basically print the return value dot of function display. Yeah. So in other languages like C++, usually a return function that has a return is usually um have a return type of string, integer, or float or whatever, let's say a string display, right? Then inside here you take another, or you don't take any parameter. Then you open your curly braces, something like this. Then you see out your messages here, right? Then if oh sorry, this one is return. You return some sort of your messages that has been stored inside this variable. Okay, but if you were to use a function to print something, then usually we'll go for the void method, the void return data, return type. So in here, because it's not returning anything, but it is printing something. So data type for those who are not returning anything is void, and for those who are return something, then it should be the data type of what it is returning. But in Python, those two does not exist, so it doesn't care whatever you are returning. So it up to your use case, depends, see which one you want to use. Okay, so okay, now define a function called multiply by 2 that accept a number. Okay, so what do we want to do with this number? Obviously we want to multiply it by 2. Okay, so how do we do that? Right, so firstly we need to take a number and then we multiply it by 2. Right, this asterisk star is an operator to multiply, right? To multiply the left hand side with the right hand side. Okay, but if you just do it like this, then there's nothing changing. You won't get any value from this function. You actually need to return this. So return number times 2. Right, so let's try this out. Let's try multiply by 2, say 4. Okay, by right, this one we should be printing out this one instead of just displaying like this. But okay, well, let's just print this out. Okay, yeah. So we print the return value that is retrieved from this function called multiply by 2 with the argument of 4. Okay, you pass in 4, then the 4 will go here, and then the 4 will enter here, and then it will return 4 times 2. So that's why we are printing out 8. Right. One more thing about return value is when you are returning something from a function, we can store that function in a variable. We can store that value in a variable. Okay, so let's say I have a variable called result. So what I'm doing here is I'm assigning the return value. I'm assigning the return value of this function into this variable. Okay, so I'm free to use whatever values, I'm free to use the value that is stored inside this variable later on. Let's say later on down the line, I want to reuse the code, right? So I want to reuse the result. There's no need for me to call the function back. I can just take the result that is stored inside the variable here. Okay. Okay, so here I can print result. Okay, let's change the number. Okay, so I pass in 10. Okay, so return 10 times 2, so it's 20. Right, so other than just taking single arguments, okay, functions can also take how many ever arguments you want. So let's say multiply. Okay, let's create a function called multiply. So we are expecting two arguments here. One is the number that we want to multiply. Okay, put it like this. So create a function that sets to args. So the first arg is A times B, right? So the first argument is A, which is number to multiply. And then the second number is how do I put it? Basically the other number to multiply it together. Yeah, I don't know how to word it. But then yeah, you get the point. So we are expecting. Oops. We are expecting two numbers, and the return value will be the multiplication of those two numbers that we have passed in. So can just put it here, num1 and num2. This is how you pass in multiple arguments in a function, right? So the return statement will be just as simple as return num1 times num2. Right, let's try this out. Multiply. Okay, let's put 6 and 10. Right. So yeah, we are expecting 60, right? So it is correct. And we can do all sorts of other calculations and also like display printing stuff. Most of them are being used in this manner, basically. Right. So now that out of the way, yeah, okay, that out of the way. Now let's move on to the optional argument. Okay, so the function def display name, then name plus name. Right. So the problem just now that we had is, let's say that this function, suddenly some random developer called this function, okay, but they forgot to put in the argument. Okay, so what should we, how should we settle this? Okay, so one simple fix is to use optional argument. Okay, optional argument is basically in the function declaration, we already have a default value if the value is not given. Okay, so in this case, if this happens, so in the function itself, we already specify what is the value if there is no input for it, right? So in this case, if there are no given name, so I want the name to be John, right? So now let's print this. So you see, there's no more error because we already have the default value for it. Yeah. So let's see what happened if I put in another name. Kill. Right. So hello kill. So you can see when we actually provide the arguments, then it will be overriding this. Okay. But if none are given, so it will take the default value. Right. Let's see another example. Okay. Let's say def calculate. Okay. This calculate accept two numbers, num1, num2. Okay. Then just simply return num1 times num2 over 2. Yeah, sorry, just num1 times num2. Okay. For the same thing, calculate. Let's calculate 20. Let's just put in one number and see what happens. So calculate is missing one positional argument, so argument num2. So in this case, we only provide num1, but not num2. So how do we fix this? We can also use conditional arguments when we have conditional arguments. No, we can also use optional arguments or the default value for the arguments if we have multiple of them, right? So let's say this one by default, I want it to be 1, right? Let's say if the user didn't provide it, so the default value will be 1. So let's see. So 20, I only provide one value and 1. So 20 times 1 is just 20. Let's try provide 12. Okay. Run this should be 240. Okay. It didn't use the 1 because this value has override this thing, right? So that the actual value that we pass in is being used here in the return statement. Right. Okay, so that's for optional argument. Okay, until now, before I move on to non-keyword arguments and keywords argument, is there any problem or any questions you guys want to ask? Can just drop your question in the chat box. Okay. All right. Okay. So, okay, yeah, right. No questions. So, okay, we can move on to the next one. This two of the stuff that I'm going to discuss now is a bit rarely being used, but it is mostly being used in, like, let's say, libraries that we are using most of the time, like, let's say, NumPy, Pandas, TensorFlow, all that sort of stuff. They have this implemented in their functions, okay, because they have just way more arguments than what we are using. We are just using one, two, like maybe they can, in the function, they can have like 5, 6, or even 10 arguments or more, not sure. But then, yeah, that's why they are using this. So firstly, non-keywords argument, right? So let's say if you don't know um, how many arguments that you are expecting when you are writing a function, right? So instead of just guessing it, like, let's say a user can pass in a list, or maybe a list that has many items, is it, inside it, or maybe just one item, or maybe two items, or maybe three. Like, we don't know the exact number, so we can use the non-keyword argument. Or if you read online, then you most probably will be seeing the star args. Okay, and the star star KW args is stands for keyword argument, right? So let's try a function that actually uses non-keyword argument. So NK args, it stands for non-keyword arguments. This is just a function name. Okay, how do we want to specify to our, how do we want to tell our functions that we are actually accepting non-keywords argument, non-keyword arguments? So we just put a asterisk, okay, set a variable name. Let's simply put it as x, or whatever, just args. Yeah. Okay, so this thing, when you have a single asterisk in front of the variable name, so this will stands for non-keyword argument, right? So by this, your function already know that inside here will be an array of items, a list of items. Okay. What are the length of the item? What are the size? The function didn't care about it, but as long as this function is accepting a variable number of arguments, right? So let's try to create a function. Okay, let's remove instead of nkr. Calculate sum, right? Let's create a function to calculate sum, but then um the number of argument is not specified. Okay, so we can calculate sum of, like, let's say 3 numbers and 5 numbers and 10 numbers. Okay, even, right? So how do we do that? Is by this is a like way to calculate sum. There are maybe some other one-line solution, but I'm going for the traditional way. So first we initialize a variable called sum, okay, equals to 0. Okay, and then since I mentioned just now, the non-keyword argument will be treated as a list. Okay, so imagine if now, if comment this. Okay, so the arg is actually a list of items. Okay, in our case, it's a list of numbers, a list of integers that we want to sum it up. So you can imagine it as like this: 24, 82, 257. Okay, 258. Okay, yeah, just imagine it will be something like this, right? So if we are calculating the sum of all of the numbers, so what are the steps that we need to do? So firstly, we have to iterate through the list, right? And we add them to the sum. Okay, so in the first iteration, we have sum equals to 0. Okay, and then sum plus the first element of args. Okay, which is 1. So now sum equals to 1, because 1 plus 0. Okay, now in the second iteration, sum is 1, taken from previous iteration. Now sum plus the second element of um, the array. Okay, the second element of the list is 24. So sum now is 25, right? So this step will go on until it reaches the end of the list, right? Until it reaches the end of the list. So, and then at the end of the iteration, when all of the elements have been iterated, when every item in the list have been iterated, then we are going to have like a sum. Okay, I'm not sure what is the value here, but then yeah, we shall see it later after this. So in order for us to achieve this, we can write a simple for loop, okay, for I in args. Okay, notice that the star args is actually the whole thing, but if you want to use it in the function, it is just args, okay, without the star. Okay, so for for number in args, okay, so that means for every number, which is 1, 24, 82, 2, 5, and 8, so for every number in the list args, so we want to add it to the sum. So we can write something as sum equals to sum plus number. Or we can write this as sum plus equals number. Right, this is a short form. Right, then finally we can finally the final value of sum will be is the sum of all of the values being passed here is located in the sum, is stored in the variable called sum. So at the end, we need to return sum. Okay. Now, it's time for us to use it. Okay. So let's call it calculate sum. Okay. Let's pass in three numbers, 1, 2, and 3. So by right, this one should return 6. Okay. So as you can see, 6. So let's try with a different number. Let's try with let's try with, let's say if we have 5 number instead of just 3, 100. Okay, 5 numbers. Right, so this returns 139. And also you can see that since this thing is returning and it's not printing, so you see the previous line, this thing should be printing 6, right? As we have seen just now, this thing should be printing 6. But if we didn't explicitly ask it to print, so the result will be gone. It will just print the last line. Okay, if you don't explicitly ask it to print. So if you want to see the previous result, we have to add on the print. And we have to use the print function. Right. Yes. Okay, so yeah, you can see the top one is returning 6, the bottom one is returning 129. Right. So you can see this is like one of the benefits of using non-keyword argument. So you can have a function that accept various number of arguments. Okay. And yeah, so this is non-keywords argument. So the next one is keywords argument. Right. So keywords argument is almost similar to the key value pairs. Okay. But then it's a argument that have a keyword for it. As you know from dictionary, right? Okay, let's say we have a key and we have the value. Okay. So every time we want to call this value, we have to call it by the key. Okay. But if we let's say in keywords argument, the key is the value of the argument, okay, is attached to the key. Okay, it's somehow similar to the key value pairs, right? So let me show you. Let's create another function called a person. Okay. So how do we tell our function that this function is accepting keyword argument? So as I mentioned just now, it's just star KWRs. Or whatever you want to call it, but then make sure there are 2 stars in front. Okay. And then we can just print out the KWRs here. So just to show you how does the thing, how are the stuff being passed through as a keyword argument, right? So to use a function with a keyword argument, right? So we have to provide a key and then we have to provide their value. Okay. Let's try doing name equals to journey, okay. And also comma, don't forget, because we are passing multiple stuff. We are passing multiple argument, same with previous. Right, name equals to Johnny and age is 30. There will be enough for now, right? So now let's try and run this. So as you can see, it prints out a dictionary, but the dictionary is holding the key value pairs of the argument, right? So this is the output if you use KWRs. Okay. Let's try to have another function, okay, where a function can have both non-keywords argument and KW arguments, right? So let's call this simple. Okay, this simple function is actually taking not taking one. It's taking non-keyword arguments and also taking KW arguments, right? So now let's print out the arguments and let's also print out the KW arguments. Okay. So as we know, for us to pass in multiple arguments, okay, in non-keyword arguments, we just separate it like this. Sorry. We just separate it with comma. There's no equal sign, there's no nothing. Because it's a non-keyword argument, right? There's no key for it. So we can just put 1, 2, 3, okay. 1, 3. Okay. And let's try passing in keyword arguments. So let's say height equals to 1.75. Right? And age is 30. Name is done. Okay. Now what happens if we print this? Okay. So you can see the arguments are printed here. The arguments are printed first. Okay. And then the second one that is printed is the KWRs. So you can see the clear difference between these two. Okay, so KWRs, when we print it out, it will be returned as a tuple. Okay. And the KWRs will be written as will be displayed as a dictionary. Okay, because it is technically a dictionary because we have a key and we have a value, right? So, okay, and until this point, is there any question that you want to ask about KWRs and non-keyword arguments? Is there any problem? Okay, no question, understand? Okay. Okay, all clear, right? So, okay. So now, we actually go back to the return value, okay? Is because there are one more thing that I didn't want to mention it just now, okay? So one thing about Python return function is Python in a Python function we can return multiple values, okay? Not just return one value. As in, let's say other languages, when you are returning multiple values, then you either have to put it in some container, let's say an array or some vector, right? Or some array list in Java, okay? And then you return the whole array list, right? But in Python, you can just return whatever you want to return, and how many of them is also doesn't matter, right? And you can return them in any form that you want. Either you can return them as a tuple, as a list, okay, as a dictionary, how many of them, yeah, it doesn't really matter, right? So let's create a function. Let's create a function. Function name is return two values. So this return two values is obviously going to return two values, which is one and another one, right? So the triple dot here is just a placeholder because for now I'm not sure on what to return yet, so we just put a placeholder first. Okay, so now we determine what are we taking in, right? So let's say for example we take in okay, we take in one number for now, right? So we take in number. So the first value that we want to return is we return the number itself. So we return the number plus we return the number plus 1, right? And also we return the number times 2. Okay. So here is the syntax if you want to return multiple stuff in a Python function, right? So we run this. Okay. Then let's try and use it. So return two values of, let's say, 5. So we are expecting two numbers here. We are expecting 6 and 10, right? Let's try picking it out. Okay, so by default it will be written in a tuple, right? Unless you really specify it, like you want it to be in a list or whatever. Yeah. So if I specify it to be written as a list, then if I run this back, then it will be written as a list, right? But by default, it is written in a tuple. Okay, yeah. So that. And usually, when you know what to expect from a function, in this case, we are expecting two values, right? So let's say that I want to straight away put these two values in a variable. So these two values, let's say 6 is my x1, here is my x2, just for example, okay? So how do we actually do that in Python, right? So in Python, it's really easy. So we can straight away write x1, comma, x2 equals to the return value, right? So now 6 and 10 will become, 6 will be stored in x1, 10 will be stored in x2, respectively, right? So let's try. Okay, so firstly, you notice that the numbers are not printed anymore. It's because they have been written into the variable itself. It has been stored into here instead of just printing it out in the standard output, right? Now we can try and print out x1 and we can print out x2. As you can see, x1 is 6, x2 is 10, right? So here's another like nice way to use another reason on why to use Python, because Python have something like this, right? So let's say, in fact, if I return another one, so number times the number times 5, right? Okay. So we are expecting three numbers, right? So we have to have three variables to store it. Wait, I didn't run it. Right. Okay. So now it is returning number plus 1, number times 2, and number multiplied by 5. Okay. So now let's just print x3. Okay. So 6, 10, and 25 as expected. Right. So let's say what happened if you forget to put another variable, although you already expect it to have 3, right? So the error that you get is like this: too many values to unpack, expected 2. Okay, this expected 2 is this part, because they only have two variables, but then they are receiving three values, sorry, not variables. They are receiving three values, but they only have two variables to store it. Okay, so that's why it returns an error. It's straight. Right, so no problem. Okay, this one is a return value, right? And other than just the ability to return normal numbers, array, not array, list, tuples, sets, dictionary, all sort of stuff, we can also return a function itself. Okay. So one question before I proceed, is any of you guys familiar with the word recursive? Have you guys heard of this word before? Or do you guys know what does recursive mean? Okay, yeah, Kishore to repeat, yeah. Okay, so recursive is basically when you do something over and over again, okay, but the something that we are doing is actually invoking some function. So here it should be recursive function calls, right? Yeah, this should be the proper name, recursive function call, right? So imagine that we have a function, okay, let's say call def test, right? So I have a function called test, okay. For now, it will just not do anything, right? So let's say if I have another function called test1, all right? So this, what does this test1 do? Is basically it's calling the test function, right? The test function is above it, not above, it's defined here, right? So let's have another function called test2. This test2 is calling test1. Okay, so as you can see, now we have like a nested function. So if I were to draw the hierarchy, it should be test2 on the top, then test1, then finally just test. So test2 is calling test1 is calling test. And test for now does not call anything, it's just hasa for now. Okay, let's say printing something. Okay, let's print hi. Right. So the idea of recursive is like this, but instead of having multiple layer of multiple hierarchies, okay, like multiple layers of calling, so it's just going to call itself. So we have something like def test, and the return of the function is going to be the function itself. Yeah. So what happened here is we have test. The return function is calling the test. So what is test itself? Test is the function calling itself. Yeah. So wait, to make it clear, let's copy this. Let's open MS Paint. Okay. Yeah, let's copy. Right. So basically, okay, we have this. Sorry for the stretch image. Right. So, colors red. Okay. So firstly, when Python encounter test, right? So it will ask, what is test doing? Test is a return. Test return itself. Okay. So return to test, which is this line. But Python will still ask, what is test? Then Python look into their own dictionary to find, have I encountered test before? Yes. Where is it? It's in this line. Then what is it? What is test? Test is calling test. Then the process keeps on looping and looping. So this is what we call a recursive function call. And it has, although it sounds really like dumb, but then it has an actual application, right? Provided that inside the application of recursive function call, we have a terminating condition so that it won't be recursively calling itself infinitely, right? To prevent the infinite loop, right? So one example of easiest application that I can think of is the how to calculate a factorial. Okay, so factorial is in maths, if we take a number, let's say take 5. Yeah, if we take 5, right, and we were to calculate the factorial, and then it is just the multiplication of the number times the number minus 1, right, and the number minus 1. So 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, right? And it will stop at 1 only, right? So it won't be multiplying 0. Okay, that's why you might ask, that's just the formula for calculating factorial. Okay, so in this case, no matter how big the number is, it will always stop at 1. So in this case, factorial of 5 is 20, 60, 120, 120. Right? 20, 60, yeah, 120, right? So how do we actually implement this in code, right? If using recursive. So firstly, okay, we have a function called factorial. Okay, this factorial accept one number. Okay, so we have number. Okay, so what are we doing now? Like what are the steps for us to calculate? We know that the number, in order for us to calculate the base case, the factorial of a number. Okay, let's take a smaller number. Let's take 2. 2 factorial. 2 factorial is just 2 times 1, which is 2. Okay, let's take an even smaller number. Okay, by definition, 1 factorial is just 1. Okay, because it doesn't have any other number to multiply. Okay, and if you go deeper, right, what is 0 factorial? 0 factorial is also 1, right? So 2 factorial is basically 2 multiplied with 1 factorial. Okay, so this one is also 2 times what is 1 factorial? 1 factorial is 1. Okay, equals to 2. Now, what is 3 factorial? 3 factorial is basically 3 times 2 factorial. Okay, what is 2 factorial? 3 times 2 times 1 factorial. So the one I'm in the parentheses is actually the one that expands from this, right? So what is 2 factorial? From here, we know that 2 factorial is equal to 2 times 1 factorial, which is here. Then what is 2 times 1 factorial is actually just 2 times 1. So, and if we simplify it, so we have 3 times 2 times 1, which is equals to 6. Right? And then we can go on for 4 factorial, right? So 4 factorial is just 4 multiplied with all the numbers that came before 4, which is 3, 2, and 1, right? So we know 3, 2, and 1 is just 3 factorial. So just 3 factorial. So 3, 2, and 1 is 6. 3 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 1 is 6. So we can just simply take 4 times 6. Oh, sorry, 4 times 6. Okay, it's equals to 24. Right. So this factorial case in its nature is a recursive case. Okay, so what does it mean by recursive? Okay, as you can see here, in order for us to calculate 4 factorial, we need to have 3 factorial. In order for us to calculate 3 factorial, we need to have 2 factorial. In order to calculate 2 factorial, we need to have 1 factorial. And what is 1 factorial? 1 factorial is just 1. Okay, so using this knowledge, okay, so we can finally go on and write our factorial function. Okay, so we know that at the smallest level of the recursion, okay, at the smallest level, the lowest level is when we have the number equals to 1. When we are trying to calculate the factorial of 1. Okay, so this in itself doesn't need any calculation because we know that factorial of 1 is just 1. So this acts as our, right? So the recursion will start based on this fact. Okay, in a recursive problem, we can have multiple base cases. Okay, it depends on the problem. But in this example for factorial, we only have one base case, right? So so how do we implement it? Okay, so as I mentioned just now, if the number is 1, all we need to do is return 1. Okay, so write an if condition. If number equals 1, right? So that means we need to return 1. Okay. That is only for number is equals to 1. Okay, what if number is more than 1? Let's say, what if we pass in 2? So this function will not do anything. Okay, based on this fact, okay, 2 factorial is equals to 2 multiplied with 1 factorial. Okay, let's put it in a word form. Okay, let's say we want to calculate the factorial of 2. Okay, which is 1 is equals to 2 multiplied with 1 factorial. Okay, what is the relationship of 2 and 1 in this case? So 2 and 1 is just it's just minus 1 from 2. So we can also rewrite this as 2 multiplied with the factorial of 2 minus 1. Okay, instead of writing this, okay, let's switch to this factorial of 1, factorial 2. Okay, so factorial of 2, okay, factorial 2 is equal to 2 multiplied with factorial 1. But factorial 1 can be rewritten as 2 multiplied with factorial of 2 minus 1, which is the same thing if you think about it, right? So now to see whether what we have written here is correct or not, okay, based on, we already know what we written on top here is correct, okay? Now let's see whether what we write here, bottom here, is correct. So let's try to do factorial 3. Factorial 3, right? So factorial 3 is equal to 3 multiplied with factorial 2. Okay, but what is factorial 2? We already know that factorial 2 is here, right? But before we actually can expand it to here, what is the relationship between 3 and 2? 3 and 2 is just 2 is 3 minus 1. So 2 multiplied with factorial, and not 2, sorry, here is 3. Okay, 3 multiplied with factorial 3 minus 1. Okay, so the more you write this down, the more you can see the pattern. Okay, so the pattern is actually factorial of n is equals to n multiply the factorial of n minus 1. Okay, so this is what we will be returning if the number is not 1. Okay, so we already have the case if the number is 1. Now, if the number is not 1, then we can just return number multiply with the italicized. Okay, number multiply with factorial of number minus 1. Okay, let's comment this out. Okay, now let's try and run this code first, see whether got error or not. Okay, there's no error. Okay, now let's try and call it. So factorial of, let's say 5, because we know we calculated manually factorial of 5 is 120, right? That's right. So it indeed return 120, right? So that means our calculation and our return formula here is correct. Okay. So where does the factorial and where does the recursive come from? Is from here. Okay. The factorial, okay, if number equals to 1, then return 1. Okay, there's no recursion here, right? The recursion happens here. Okay. Number multiply with the factorial, which is itself, okay, factorial is the function itself of the number minus 1, right? So this is what going to happen if we write this in the like proper words. Okay, so let's say I'm entering factorial of 5. Okay, so what happened? 5 is our number, so number equals to 5. Then it checks whether number equals to 1 or not. So in this case, it's clearly not equals to 1, so it will skip this part. Then it will return number, which is 5, multiplied with factorial of number minus 1. What is number minus 1? Is 5 minus 1. 5 minus 1 is 4. Okay, so in the return statement, this is a function call in itself. So if Python see another function call, then it will treat it as, okay, this is a new function that I need to open, right? So number now is 4. Okay, so the equal sign. Okay, number now is 4. Is number equals to 1? No. Okay, so no need to bother with this line. Then continue with this. Return number times factorial number minus 1. So return 4 multiply with factorial 4 minus 1 is 3. So this process will keep on going and going and going until the number is equal to 1. Let's say on this side, okay. Let's say somewhere around here, we have 2 multiply factorial of 1, right? So in this case, number is 1. So it checks with this condition. If number equals to 1, so this one is true. Okay. So this one is just returning 1. So you remember that we have this value, right? Okay. is currently not being evaluated, but it is stored somewhere in the current memory. Okay, so the number here, which are 5, 4, somewhere here is 3, then here is 2, here is 1. So it just multiply all of the values together because of here. Okay, so in the end, we will have something like this: 5 multiplied with 4, okay, 2, that's 1. Right. So this is why we can use recursion to solve the factorial problem. Okay. There are other stuff to like optimize this algorithm. Okay. To uh, to uh, to not use the recursion to solve this problem because of memory issues. Okay. But then since we are doing a small number, so it doesn't really matter at all. But then just for you to grasp the idea of recursion, so that's why I brought the topic of factorial, okay, because it's the easiest case to imagine recursive on. Okay. Okay, so that quickly turns into a math class. Okay, so are you guys still okay? Any question to ask for recursive function calls? Other than factorial, is it common to use recursion? All I can say is if you're really interested, okay, if you're really interested on learning about recursion, then most of the time where there exists recursion, then people will go towards dynamic programming, okay? Because in dynamic programming, we have something called memoization, which is it's not memorization. It's not. Yeah, wait. Let me write it down. It's memoization. Okay, it's not memorization. Okay, so this memoization thing is really it's highly optimized algorithm. Okay, but then you have to learn the concept so that you can implement it on your own. But then I don't think nowadays there are a lot of application of recursion because people have figured out a better way to do stuff. Okay, so this one is just to let you guys know the idea that recursion exists, okay, in programming language, not just in Python, in any other programming language, recursion exists, okay. All right, okay. Any other question that you guys want to ask? Right, so no problem. Okay, if no problem, then we go on to the next confusing topic, which is lambda expressions. Okay, um, any of you guys here learn JavaScript before? Or any of you guys here are like ever heard of lambda expressions? Heard before. Okay. Okay, nice. Too complex, yeah. So in here, to avoid confusion, okay, for all of the attendees, so I will not be covering all of the use cases of lambda. I will just be explaining what is lambda, what does lambda do, and some simple beneficial usage of lambda expression. Okay. Lambda expression is an expression, okay, by the name. It's basically a function without a name. Okay, so if you guys have learned JavaScript before, in JavaScript we have anonymous function, or in fact the if is immediately invoke function expression, which basically takes in a function that doesn't have a name. Okay, so imagine in Python, if we want to write a function, right? So we have to define, and then your function name, right? And then we do something here, right? But lambda expression is basically a function without a name that can do something. Yeah, this is what lambda expression is. But this is highly overly simplified. Okay, the syntax is not defined. Okay, since by the book it's not a function, it's an expression. Okay, so it doesn't have the def keyword. for whenever we want to define it. So how do we actually use lambda expression is, let's say we want to, let's assign it to a variable called x, okay? And this x is accepting a lambda expression. So for us to invoke the lambda, not invoke, yeah, I can say, for us to create the lambda expression, so we type in the lambda keyword, LAMBDA, right? Lambda, right? So in lambda, there's two things that you need to keep track of. One is this thing, which is the left hand side, and another thing is the expression. Okay, so the left hand side here is the argument, right? So this three dot is just a placeholder, okay, for now. Okay, so anything at the left of the colon, okay, at the left of the colon, basically this part, okay, is called the arguments. Okay, anything at the right of the colon is called the expression. Okay, so lambda expression can have many arguments. Okay, can have however much you want arguments also can, but then can only have one expression. So that means you can have something like lambda a b c d e like that type g h. Okay, you can have however many arguments that you want, but you can only have one expression. Example, just for example. Okay, so this here is an expression. Okay, so let's try writing an actual useful lambda expression. Okay, so as I mentioned just now, it's just a function without a name. So if you return back here, we know that a function can accept arguments, right? Like this, can accept two arguments, okay, accept one argument here, okay. And then what comes after the colon is where we use the arguments that is being passed. Okay, so same thing goes with lambda expression. So in lambda expression, the left hand side is where we put our arguments, okay. Then at the right hand side is where we use the arguments. Oh my god. Okay. Right. So at the, oh my god, sorry. Right, at the right hand side is the I thought the lambda is going to be like this. It's that one is from, if you have complex usage, like let's say you're mapping something with a lambda function, then yeah, it's going to look like that. But on the base, lambda expression supposed to look like this. Okay. At the left hand side is just the expression, and no, at the left hand side of the colon is just the argument. At the right hand side is the expression. Okay. So for now, just let's say we want to take in number and then we increment it by 10. Right. So let's run that. Okay, so for now, obviously we don't have any outputs because we haven't used the lambda expression yet. We only define it. So how do we actually use it? Okay, so still remember in function when we have a when we have a function called let's say fn. Okay, fn. This fn accepts one number, right? Let's say number plus one, right? So how do we use the function is by calling the name and then we put in parentheses and then we pass in the parameters or arguments. Okay, so fn of 1. Okay, this one just return 2 because it takes in the 1 and do whatever it has to return and then print it out here. Right, same goes with lambda expression. How do we use lambda expression is same with how we call a function. So in this case, our lambda expression is stored inside x, so we can just call x, then open a parentheses, okay, and then we need to pass in values. Okay, for now the values we are just using 1, okay, because we set 1 here, so pass in 1, or let's say pass 12. Okay, but the idea here is you just pass in how many arguments that you have stated here. In this case, I'm only stating 1 arguments, so I'm only passing 1 argument here, right? So when I print it, it will return to me 22 because 12 is going to be passed as the a, right? Then the a and the return will be a plus 10. Okay, so that is lambda expression. Now let's see an example. Let's say if we have two numbers, okay, a and b, then we are returning the sum of two numbers. Right, so we write a lambda, okay, so take in two arguments, return the sum of those two numbers. So how do we use it? It's the same. So y and then open parentheses 1 comma tab. Right. Okay, let's change it up. Okay. 7 and 4. Right. So this will return 98. Okay. So that's lambda at its most basic form. Okay. And one thing about lambda is you can return lambda inside a function. Okay, this is where it gets a bit more confusing. Okay, but then hang on, just for you to get the grasp the idea of it. Okay, let's say if we have a function. Okay, we have I need to print it because as I mentioned, this one is just a return function. It's a means of return. So and not means of return. It's basically the same with return in any other function. So if you want to print it, you can, right? It won't make any difference. But in Jupyter Notebook, if you are displaying one item, and let's say the item is a return value from some other function, then yeah, it will straight away just display it. That's just in Jupyter Notebook. Yeah. So that's why we don't need to explicitly ask to print. Okay, but then we need to print if let's say I'm using it more than one time. Let's say I print 1 and 10. So it will print out the most bottom line. In this case, if you want to see both of the results, so you need to have multiple prints. You need to print both of them. Yeah. So print, yeah. Print them, and then only you can see both of the results. If you are just using one, then no need to print also can. No need to use the print function specifically. But then if you're using multiple, then yeah. If you want to see the multiple values printed out, then you have to use print. Okay, now let's move on to the lambda, return lambda as a return lambda in a function. Okay, so this might get a bit confusing, but then you don't need to be fully you don't need to fully understand this, but I'm just showing you that in Python we can do this thing. Okay, so let's create a function called test. Okay, so this test set a number multiply. Okay, another function called multiply. Okay, just ignore the previous one. So this multiply is accepting a number, okay, a number, right? And this function will return a lambda expression. Okay, so what will it return? So it will return lambda x. Okay, so x. Okay. Just put anything lambda of a, then a multiplied with x. Right? So such stuff is doable in Python, right? So how do we use it? Okay. Firstly, when we know that this function returns a lambda, so as you can see, what do we do with lambda is we store a lambda inside the variable. Okay. So we can say something. Let's put it test. Okay. A variable called test. This we call the function. Okay. The function name is multiply. Okay. 5. It's in the number, right? So in this case, if we print out test, let's see what happens if we print out test. Okay, so if you can see, as you can see, when we print out test, it will print out this thing. Okay, this is basically it has a meaning. So basically, it's saying that what is what is the thing that belongs inside the test. Okay, in this case, it's a return value of multiply. What does multiply returns is a lambda function. What does the lambda function returns? Returns the multiplication of two number. Not x, sorry, it's number. Right, yeah. So it returns the value of a multiplied with number. The number is what we have given here on the top. Okay, so now currently this test object is a lambda expression. It's this part. Okay, so let's remove the print function. how can we access the lambda part of this function? So we can just pass in call test, okay, as with any other lambda expression. How do we call a lambda expression? Is by doing this. We take the variable name, we put a parenthesis, and then we put whatever value that we want. Okay, in this case, our lambda is accepting one value. So it's just, we're going to pass in number 2. Okay, so the output here will be 10. Because why? Here we pass 5 as 5 is number, right? So 5 is here now. Okay, just imagine 5 is here. And then in this line, test 2, when we are passing this 2 actually belongs to the lambda. Okay, so lambda is accepting A. So A here now is 2. So it returns 2 times 5. So it's equal to 10. Right? So it's a bit, I know it's a bit confusing at first, but then yeah, it's what we can do with lambda expression as a return in a function. And another thing with lambda expression, another benefit of this is, just imagine if you want to have function to multiply by 2 and function to multiply by 3. Okay, so without lambda expression, you would have to create 2 functions. So def mul2, which accept one number. Okay, let's imagine. And then we have another function called mul3, which is multiply by 3. So it's a pass, this is just return num times 2. All right, then here is return num times 3. Right, so you have 2 functions with 2 return statements. But if we are using this lambda return in a function, so we don't need 2 functions because we already have them in here. Okay, so in this case, here we can say that 2 equals to, okay, let me remove this. So mul2, it stands for multiply by 2, is equals to multiply 5. And then you can see mul2 bracket 2, right? So we do, it will be the same thing. Right, now let's use the same function, but I want the number to multiply by 3. So mul3 equals to, we want to multiply 5, okay, with 3. You see, as you can see here, I'm using the same function, but I'm getting different result because of the lambda. Okay, the value that I pass here matters, right? So this basically solves the problem of having to write 2 different functions to achieve like stuff that we can achieve with just one function. Yeah, so that's lambda expression. Okay, I know it's a bit confusing and hard to understand at first. Okay, but do you guys have any problem to us? Like, have you guys encountered any errors or anything that you don't really understand about this? Yeah, be sure to drop down your question. Because next up we'll be moving on to the libraries, which is NumPy and Pandas. And at the end of this session, we will have a like short question, okay, for you guys to answer on your own. And yeah, get it, but confusing. C++ also have this function, or is it named as what? Yeah, if I remember correctly, C++ also have a lambda function. It's basically works, the concept is the same, but the syntax is different. In C++, if I remember correctly, is how you invoke a lambda expression is by using the square bracket, and then you pass in your parameters here. Okay, and then you return, if I'm not mistaken, it should be something like this. Yeah, something along this line, but then yeah, it's written like this. Okay. Right, so if no question, then yeah, we can move on to really no other question want to ask. Then let me drink water for a while.
Maybe we
Okay,
take
yeah.
a 5-minute break.
Come again. Sit.
We take a 5-minute break.
Yeah, if we want to take 5-minute break also can. Then we'll continue at 3:20 because after this is just
2:20,
yeah,
okay.
nothing else. Can.
Okay.
So we'll take a 5-minute
Can you
break.
count?
So we'll continue at the 3:20. Right. All right. Okay. Right. So okay, regarding the libraries, okay. So now we have settled everything from variables until lambda. So we have libraries and also OOP left. So for you guys to be able to actually do the challenges, the questions down here, right? Um, you guys will need to learn how to use pandas. So I'll go pandas now. Okay, I'll go for pandas first, and then after pandas we'll go on OOP, and then we'll see if we have time. Then we can go for NumPy, right? So now, okay, if you open the skeleton file, which is this file, okay, Python crash course. So you scroll down to using libraries and pandas, you will see that there's a line saying pip install pandas. Okay, so in Jupyter Notebook, this is a command for us to install library directly from Jupyter, right? Rather than you opening your command prompt and writing pip install pandas, you can do it directly from the Jupyter Notebook. Okay, so for those who are opening the IPython notebook, you can just press run here, right? So for me, in this case, I have installed pandas already, right? So for those of you guys who don't have pandas, then you can run this cell, okay, and let it install, okay, and wait for a moment, wait to install. Once you have done finish installing, then you can just write finish in the chat. Oh yeah, oh it's okay. Okay, Wei Jun, you scroll down to using libraries, okay, in the IPython notebook just now. Okay, scroll down to using libraries. Scroll down until you find pandas. Okay, and inside the pandas, the first cell that you will see is, let me clear this. The first cell that you will see is pip install pandas. This line. So this line is used to install libraries. Okay, directly from the IPython notebook. Okay, so that means you don't have to open your command prompt or terminal and then write pip install pandas. Okay, it's basically doing the same stuff but from Jupyter, right? So for you to install this, you can just run the cell and wait for it to finish install. Okay, for me, I've already installed pandas, so that's why it says that requirement already satisfied. So yeah, so for those of you guys haven't installed yet, so might as well install it and let it finish. Okay, so I've seen yeah, quite a number of people have finished. Only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, yeah, 5 people have finished. I'm going to wait a little bit more. You click run, nothing happened. Oh, um, Shantana, can you try to? Nothing happened. Is the cell run already? Like, can you see the numbers in the square bracket here? No variable defined. Okay, if like that, then for those who have errors installing in the, yeah, this thing is came pre-written. I've already written this in the skeleton file, so yeah, it should be the same command. But if you cannot install it through your Jupyter notebook, so what you have to do is open back your CMD. Okay, then you have to type pip install pandas. Right. So yeah, for me, requirement already satisfied because I already have it installed. So the command is pip install pandas. Or if that is giving you error, then I have to type Python -m pip install pandas. Yeah, both of them work. Python Pip Install Pandas. Right. So if there's any error, like really you cannot install it, then yeah, you can contact, you can straight away go to the Discord channel for troubleshooting, right? So for those who have completed, can continue, right? So how do we actually use pandas? Okay, so for us to use any libraries in Python, first we have to import the library first. So how do we import it? Import pandas. Okay, so yeah, that's it. Okay, and also when we import it, every modules from pandas, like let's say we want to use some modules from pandas. Let's say in pandas there's this module called display. Okay, just for example. Okay, so for me to use display, I have to append pandas dot in front of the display, right? Because this method is a member of this library. Okay, so I have to write pandas dot display. So let's imagine that we are using a lot of pandas method, and writing pandas too many times might be tiring. So there's another short form for it, that we can shorten this pandas name to whatever name we want. But usually if pandas, then we import pandas and then put the as pd. Right? So what this will do is, instead of calling pandas dot something, okay, then now it changed to pd dot something, right? So pd dot something is much more shorter to write. So yeah, so import pandas as pd, then you run it. Okay, so now, why mine says no module named pandas? No module named pandas. Uh, have you imported? Have you installed pandas first? If you haven't installed pandas, then if you import it, then yeah, you have to pip install first. Install. Sirath, can you take a look? Yeah, all right, thanks. Okay, so now how do we actually use pandas? So in pandas, there's a thing called data frame. Okay, so data frame is basically name pandas is not defined. Uh, it's not defined. It's pandas. Yeah. Uh, you pip ins. I'm assuming you have installed it. Name pandas. Name error PD is not defined. Have you guys imported? Oh, okay, but so it should be install first and then you import, and then down here, right after you have imported, then only you can use pandas. Weird. There is underline at pandas. If there is underline, so that means it haven't installed correctly. Can you try opening your CMD, right? And oops, your CMD, and then write Python. Okay. when you write Python, then you should see this prompt, right? And then type back the this command, import pandas as PD. Whether there's an error or not. It worked in CMD. Okay. If like that, then you might want to restart your kernel for some reason. I'm not sure. You can restart your kernel and then just run the import pandas as PD. Press the restart and then run import pandas as PD. Okay, is there anyone that successfully run the import pandas part, or is everyone having problem? Okay, there are some people who can run. Okay, yeah, so that's good. Oh no. The display just now is just a sample function. It doesn't exist. Yeah, pandas as PD only. The PD display is just for me to show only. It's not an actual method. So that's why. Right. So okay, now let's continue. So now let's imagine we have before that, in pandas there's a thing called data frame. Okay, so what data frame is actually basically a spreadsheet. Okay, okay. Data frame is basically something like this, right? It's basically your Excel spreadsheet with a row and column. This one is A, B, C, D is a column, then 1, 2, 3, 4 is the rows. Okay, so in data frame it behaves the same way. So how do we actually use the data frame is by, okay, firstly we have to decide on something to store, right? So remember just now earlier when we are doing the dictionary example, so we are storing name, age, and their student ID, for example. Okay, let's do that now. So let's create 3 dictionaries of storing 3 different students information. So we have student 1. Okay, student 1, I want to keep the name. Okay. Which is John. Okay. Then the age, which is say 18. And the ID. ID is 1000. Right? Let's just copy this. Let's just copy this and paste it multiple times. So in this case, I'm planning on having 3 dictionaries. So student 1, student 2, student 3. Change the name to file, which is 16 maybe 1001. Here is right, 20, page 20, ID is 1002. Okay, so imagine this is all of our students' data, right? So if let's say we want to visualize it as a spreadsheet, so how can we do that, right? So first we need to create the data frame itself, right? So how do we create that? So we usually store it in a variable called df. Okay, df stands for data frame, but it can be whatever variable name you want. So just use df equals to. Now we are calling the data frame method from pandas. So how do we do that? Is pd dot capital D dot data frame. Right. Just by doing this, you are actually instantiating a blank data frame, okay, which is a blank spreadsheet, basically. And but we don't want a blank spreadsheet. We want a spreadsheet with all this information inside, right? So how can we do that? Is we basically pass all of each of the dictionary as an array, as a list. Okay. So we create a list inside the parentheses. You can say student 1, comma, student 2, comma, student 3. Right, so this basically settles the data frame, right? So how do we actually view the data frame? So in order for us to view, we can just call back the variable name, which is df. So we run, so we can see we have a column of name, column of age, column of ID, which their respective value, right? Um, the order here is depending on the order where you place your dictionary here, right? So let's say if I put, okay, now John, Kyle, and Ming, okay, is in this order. But let's say if I change it up, middle is student 1, here is student, oops, here is student 2, and okay, here is student 2, here is student 3. Okay, let's do that. And notice how the data frame change in order, right? Instead of John, Kyle, and Ming, it's Ming, John, and Kyle, right? And not just that, their age and ID also follow together, not just their name. Okay. So usually in data frame, we search through data in data frame by the column, okay, not by the rows, because usually when we want to see something, we want to see the column values, because column values are specific, right? So let's say if I want to print out just the name of a data frame, so how can I do that? So data frame, every rows of data is actually a key value pairs. Every rows and every column, sorry. Every rows and column is a key value pair. So how do we reference a key value pair? Is by calling the key. So the key is the column, right? So in this case, I want to print out all the names. So I just call df and then with the key of name, right? So after this, you can see Ming, John, and Kyle. Just the name printed out, right? And not the age and not the ID. The 0, 1, 2 at the left column is not actually a column, it's just a row count of how many rows that we have, right? And let's try printing age. So we have 20, 18, and 16. And same goes with ID. So you can call column by using this square bracket. Okay, now let's see how do we actually okay, let's add another student before that. Here,
I want to ask why I cannot make the table come up.
have you called the df here?
Oh, need to call the df. Okay.
Yeah, I need to call df. Yep. Right, is it showing up in your IPython notebook?
Yeah, got show the table already.
All right, let's. Okay, so now let's add another student, okay, in our dictionary called student 4, and let's append a student with, let's append the list with student 4. Right, so if we run this column, then if we display it back, so we are going to have another student, right, with ID of 3, name is James, okay, age 21, right? This one, all the values are just arbitrary values, just put whatever you want. Okay, but the point here is, let's say if I want to only display the value of I want to display the rows of I want to display the rows of data where their age is less than 20. Okay, in this case, I mean, we only have 4 rows of data, so that means I can just eyeball it to see that John and Kyle satisfy my condition because their age is less than 20, right? But in, let's say we have like thousands of rows, so it's almost impossible for us to manually do it one by one. So in data frame, we can filter the whole data frame basically based on our condition, right? So how do we filter it is by we write df, okay, and the square bracket, and what do we want to return on what condition. Inside the square bracket is where we put our condition. So just now I mentioned that the condition is for age that is less than 20, right? Less than, just strictly less than, not less than equals to, right? So how do we write that is, right, df, open another square bracket, of age, okay, less than 20. Yep. So this is how you filter a data frame with a like certain condition. If you have multiple condition, then you can just use them with, let's say, use with a logical operator and. So that means you have two conditions, right? But in this case, I'm just filtering one. So if I run this, it will show only John and Carl because their age is less than 20. Right, let's change it to more than equals 20. So we know that Ming and James will be displayed because their age is 20 and 21. Okay, and let's change it out a bit. I want to filter the name where the name is not equals to me. So it will print out everything except for me, right? And let's say I want to combine two conditions. I can use the logical operator or df dot df name not equals to John. Oh, wait, what? Serious and because is AMT, right? Uh, it's or how do you input that not equal sign? Not equal is actually just exclamation mark and an equal sign. That's all. But I have some extension to make it look nice. So that's why you can see the not equal sign like this. So it's actually just exclamation mark and equal sign, but then stick close together. So this one is just a visual thing. Okay. So that is how to filter, right? So remember just now I mentioned that in data frame where we every time we fetch data, when we want to see some data, we actually call it by the column. Okay. But now let's say if I want to print a row of data instead of a column of data. Let's say I want to print this row, John, age 18, and the ID is 1000. So how can I do that? It's by using ilog. Okay. Ilog is a function by data frame, by pandas, sorry, where it basically returns the item by the row index. So how do we use ilog is by writing, firstly we put the name, which is df. df is our data frame name, dot iloc, right? And then we put a square bracket. Inside the square bracket is where the index belong. So let's say I want to print row number 2. Okay, row number 2 has an index of 1. So I just type in 1. I can get John, age 18, and ID is 1000. Right? So let's say let's print, right? You can see James 31 and 1003 for the ID, right? So ilog is getting the records by row and where is it now? For this, right? So, and if we call it straight by df, we will print out the thing by column, right? So ilog by row, and without ilog is just column, right? And okay, this is the part where
Daniel,
yes.
could you go up a little bit? I lost focus. Upper, a little bit upper. A little bit more. Yeah, okay. Can you wait for a while?
Yep, sure thing.
All right, thank you.
All right, no problem. Okay, so now you remember in the beginning of the session, if you open your file, right, there should be another. If you open the folder that you have unzipped from the GitHub, from our GitHub, okay, there's another file called sample_data.csv, right? So for those who are curious, they might have opened this file, and if you have already opened this file, it's basically a comma separated value file, okay. So to make it look much more nicer, you can open it in Excel, right? So let's open it with Excel. Yeah, so it's basically just a spreadsheet file. Oh my god. Okay. And yeah, so you have a spreadsheet of data. This one is some random data I fetched from the internet. Is some New Zealand economics data. Okay, so it doesn't matter what the data is actually, but I just want to let you guys know how do we actually read CSV or comma separated value files from just read the files into Python, right? So in Pandas, there's a function called read_CSV. Okay, so how read_CSV. Okay, and don't forget the PD. Okay, so how do you actually want to read the files? So firstly, you make sure that you know where your file is located. In this case, I purposely place it in the same directory so that we don't have to care about uh, full directory, the absolute path. So for us to read this in, we just have to put it inside a quotation mark. We just type in the name, sample_data.csv, right? And before we actually run the cell, we need to attach it. We need to store this whole thing, okay, this whole thing inside a variable. Right? So just create another variable called df2, okay, or up to you, whatever you want to name it, right? df2 equals to pd.read_csv sample data.csv, right? You can run that and you can try printing it out. So df2. So you can see it will print out the top 5 lines and the bottom 5 lines. Okay, in total there are 37,000 rows. So this is when it is much more faster to calculate using Python instead of like calculate it manually by hand, right? So this one is I'm not sure whether this one is real or not, but yeah, there are data inside. Okay, so one cool thing about data frame is it came with a function called .head. Okay, head. So when you run this, it will just display to you the top 5 row of the data set, of the data frame, sorry. So you have row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5. Okay, this is used for you to like just to get a peek into what the data set contains. Okay, usually what values are there, what each column is about, yeah, something like that. So you can use df2.head, right? So and also if you have a numerical data set, okay, let's say you have a data set. In this case, you have the year, okay, but then it's not relevant to use. But then I just show you. Okay, code plus code. Okay, there's another method called describe. Okay, if you run this, it will display to you the count, which is the total number of rows. Okay, the mean, which is the mean, not average, but then the mean. Okay, then STD is standard deviation. Okay, mean is minimum. This mean, MIN, minimum. 25% is the first quartile. Quartile. And 50% is the median. 75% is the third quartile. And lastly, the maximum, right? So all these numerical values, like let's say you're analyzing a data frame of some, I'm not, don't know what information you are analyzing, but then if you need this sorts of information, then yeah, you can use df2.describe. But in this case, it is describing the year column, okay, which is technically useless because it's just year. It doesn't bring any like significant values. So this one just to show you an example, basically. All right. So, so that's all for data frame. Okay. Do you guys have any problems?
Can
Regarding
I
this.
see the read CSV that again, the coding?
Yep. Sure. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, so that's data frame out of the way. Okay, now let's move on to the final one, which is class. Okay, so in classes in Python is just direct. Okay, so how do we create a class is by using the keyword class. Okay, let's create a class for a person. Okay, this one is a sample class. Right. So if you guys have learned OOP before, or object oriented programming, each class need a thing called constructor. Okay, constructor, right? So constructor is basically a function which will be assigning values when we instantiate a class object, right? So basically, to put it into a simple term, is a function that will be assigning values when we first call the object, when we first create the object. Okay, so constructor function or just a constructor in Python is written like this: def underscore underscore init underscore underscore. Right, yeah, I know it's a bit weird, but then yeah, it's underscore underscore init underscore underscore, right? And then you put a parentheses, right? And then one important thing is you have to pass in self. Okay? So this self is like a this pointer in C plus plus. Yeah. So it's like it's the same thing, but in Python it is called self, right? So and also other than the self, we can pass in any other arguments that we want, right? So for example, let's say I want to pass in name and age because I'm going to take a class for a person, okay? So name and age, right? So we have a name and age. So now we have to assign the name and age to the so that it belongs to the class, okay? No, it belongs so that the class member variables have values, okay? So how do we do that is by taking self dot name equals to name. Okay? So just keep in mind that self dot name is from this class. Okay, this name is from here, which is the one that we will be providing later on, right? So just keep that in mind. It's two different things, although it has the same name, right? So self dot age is equals to age, right? So let's run. Oops, let's run this first, right? So we have a class that has a constructor, right? So how do we use this class? So we store an object inside a variable. So let's define a variable called person1, okay, equals to, okay, in Python, the way you create a new object from a class is um call the object name, and we call the class name, sorry, call the class name, which is person, right? And you open and close parentheses, right? What do we actually put inside here, right? As you can see here in init, we have put three arguments, which is self, name, and age. But then the only thing that we need to pass is name and age only. We don't need to pass the self. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Every time you see a self, then it's not our task to give it a value. So you can have name, so Daniel, and age of, or age is an integer, so 22, right? So we can create however many person we want. So person2 is equal to person6 is 20, right? So something like this. If I run this, it won't give me any error. Okay. But let's say I want to have another function in my class that is used to print out the particular of a person, right? So this particular is name and their age, okay? And then print out a simple sentences. Print out a simple sentence, okay? So inside here, we need to create another function, say def print info, okay? Since we will be using the name and age from the class, okay, so we need to pass in the self. Okay, that's all we need actually. So just pass in the self, okay, and what else do we need? Oh yeah, we need to print. Okay, we need to print. So for now, let's do a simple print. Name. Oh, this name is self.name. Okay, because we are using value for every instance. Okay, we are using the value of self.name instead of the name that we provide here. Okay, and then next up we have print age self.age. Right. So we already have this function, okay, print info. So how can we use that? Okay, so this print info is a member method of this class. Okay, so logically every object that belongs to this class have access to this method. Okay, so since it has access to that method, so what can we do is we call back person1 dot print info, and don't forget the parentheses. Okay, in here the parentheses on top here we have defined that, and we have said that we need to pass in self. Okay, but as I mentioned just now, we don't need to actually pass in anything for it to run, because the class will handle the self in itself. Okay, so if you run this, have I not? Oh yeah, sorry. Put string. Okay, yeah, I'll tell you the reason for it, for this in a bit. Right. So the first one probably here. Right. This one here and here. All right. Okay, so as you can see now, we can print the particular of person one, which is name is Daniel, then age is 22. Right. So now let's try with person2 dot print info. Right. So the same thing will be printed. Is Daniel is 22 and Sid 20. Right. So just now, as you can see, there is an error. Okay, there's a like a careless error. Is because when you are printing something, right? Okay, when you are concatenating a string, right? Let's say this is a string. Remember the plus sign just now? If let's say you are joining two strings, right? And okay, this is something like this. When you print something like this, then there wouldn't be any error because both of them are strings. So it's okay to join them with the plus operator, right? But let's say this thing is a number. Okay, then it will say something like can only concatenate string, not integer. Okay, so for us to fix this, we need to convert whatever on the right hand side or whatever that we are joining to a string. And how do we do that? Is in Python, for you to convert from integer to string is really simple. You just call the str method, right? There's actually a constructor for string. Okay, we run this, and yeah, should be like this. Should be no problem. Okay, so hence that's why there's an error here, because self.age is a number, it's an integer, and we are trying to concatenate string and integer, so that's why there is an error. So before we concatenate, we need to convert the age into a string first, and then we concatenate it, right? Okay, so yeah, we have person1, okay, dot print info, and person2 dot print info. Okay, that settles it. Now let's talk something about inheritance. Okay, so inheritance is basically when we have two classes. Okay, we have two classes. One is a parent class and another one is a child class, okay, or a subclass. So the child class is inheriting the properties of the parent class. Okay, so that's the idea of inheritance. Okay, so how do we actually use inheritance or apply inheritance in Python, right? So just now we have a class called person. Okay, now let's create another class. Okay, another class called student. Right. So how do we know whether this student can inherit the person or not? So a student is technically a person, a person, a person. Okay. So a student is a, a student is a person, right? So when you have something like this, then it is suitable for student to inherit from person, right? So we create a class called student. Okay. In the top here, you see that in the person, there is no parentheses here. Okay, for class definition, there is no parentheses. But if for an inherited class, okay, not inherited class, for a class that inherits other classes or other class, so there should be a parenthesis here. Okay, called person. So basically, this is saying that create a class student that inherits person. Okay, what is person? Person is this class over here. So it will inherit everything that it has inside here, right? Whatever person has, student can use it also, right? But for this, I will change some stuff. Okay, names. Okay, yeah, I will change a little bit, right? So as usual, to create a class, we need a constructor. So constructor in Python is a bit weird. So def underscore int underscore. Okay, and then open parentheses, open it yourself. So what do we need to pass? Okay, so you see, firstly, what do person need in the constructor? Person need name and age. Okay, so we just bring that back here. Person. So inside student, it's compulsory for us to pass self. Okay, then the second one is name and age. This name and age come from person. Okay, so a student should also have name and age. Okay, but a student should also have their student ID. Student ID, right? So, how do we actually use the inheritance? Okay, in Java, there's a function called super. Okay, super, right? Same thing, but in not but in Python also we have the function called super, right? So what the super do is basically go to the parent class. It's basically referring to the parent class. Okay, and in Python, why do we need super is we need to go back to the parent class and call the constructor there. So super dot init, right? So super dot init here is referring to this init. Okay, since it is inheriting from class person, right? So what do we pass in super dot init? So since here we have already self here, right? So we don't need to pass in another self here. We just pass in the name and age, right? So that's done for super. Okay, now for our own, for not our own, for students class constructor, we still left out one more thing, which is the student ID. So we need to assign student ID somewhere. So self dot student ID equals to student ID, right? Okay, so now if let's say I want to create another method same as this, but this one is print info. Okay, I want it to have a same name, okay, but then I want it to also print the student ID. So what can I do? I can just basically override the function. So I can write print info. Okay, we need the self pointer as well. So instead of just printing name and age, I can just print name Okay, name plus self dot name. Okay, then I can print h plus convert to string self dot h. And then I print finally is what? Student ID. Yeah. Student ID, right? Plus, okay, let's see. Our student ID should be integer, right? So let's not make the same mistake. So let's change it to a string as well. So self dot student ID. Right. So this is like the one simple example of inheritance. Okay. So run this. Okay, now let's create a student. Okay. Called S1. S1 equals to student. Okay, then we pass in the name. Name Jenny. Right, which is let's say 33, right? And the student ID is 1001. Okay, let's give this a run. Okay, no errors. Okay. So let's try this print info method, right? So s1 dot print info. Okay. As you can see, we have the same method, okay, same method name as the one in class person, okay, but this person only prints out name and age, but this print info prints out name, age, and student ID, right? Although it is inheriting from person. Okay, wait, let me try on one thing. Let's create this object. All right, you see, if I disable the print info in class student, okay, as I mentioned just now, everything that a person have in this class, then any classes that inherits it will also get it, right? So in this case, in class person have this method, right? Print info. So since class student is inheriting person, so it has access to that method also. Okay, yeah, to make it much more clear, then let's print one more thing. Print I am from X person. Right. So let's print this out. Yeah, I have to recreate this one and this one. Did I not print anything else? Here, from class person. Yeah, I run this back. Here. Oops. Oh no. Okay, yeah. As you can see, even though this one S1 is a student, but then it's still printing the method from class person. Okay. Now let's uncomment this part. Let's uncomment the print info from student, right? And let's say another print statement. I am from a student, right? Let's run everything back. Okay. So you will see a new thing is displayed, which is a student ID, and also an extra sentence that I just wrote just now. Hi, I'm from class student, right? So this shows that this shows the concept of inheritance. Basically, if you're inheriting another class, then everything that your parent have, then you can also access to it. Not your parent, sorry, your parent class have. Okay, yeah, it's not your parent, it's your parent class. Okay, so let's the previous example might be a bit boring. Okay, now let's do like some a bit more logical. Okay, so now let's create a class called shape. Shape, right? And as usual, we are going to have our constructor, right, which taking self, right? So for a shape, so we need to keep track of two things. Okay, we need to keep track of the width, change, and need to keep track of the width and height. So we can assign those width and height to self dot width and self dot height respectively. Self dot height to height, right? And then we are going to have person object has no attribute print info. personal object. Have you write this down? Have you do you have the print info method? Huh. Have you run the cell just to be sure? Yeah, you have to yeah. You every time you type, then you run the cell, or every time you make changes to the class, you have to rerun the class and also re-instantiate the object, and then only you can use this thing, right? So back to class shape. So we have self.width equal to width, height equals to height. All right. So now let's add another function called area. Okay, which takes in self. So this area function will just return the basic area of a shape. Okay. So let's imagine we have four-sided polygons, or regular four-sided polygons, like squares and rectangles. So how do you calculate the area? So it's just return self.width multiplied with self.height, right? So okay, we have the class shape. So now let's create a shape. Okay, x1 equals to shape of width of, let's say, 20 and height of 10. Okay, now let's print, not print, let's see s1 dot area. Okay, it's 200, right? So 20 multiplied by 10, right? So in general, shape is too broad, you know. A circle is a shape, okay? A triangle is a shape. A trapezium is a shape, okay? A diamond is a shape, right? But then they all have different methods, different ways of calculating areas. So this is where we can apply our knowledge of inheritance, okay? So the first shape we want to do is let's do the rectangle, okay? So class rectangle. This rectangle is inheriting from the class shape, obviously, because a rectangle is a shape. Okay. Okay, based on the definition of rectangle, okay, rectangle have two width and two height, okay, and the way to calculate area is also width times height. So is there any difference? There's no difference, right? So if there's no difference, so we can just put a pass here, okay. Technically, it is useless, okay, to have something like this, but then just to show you guys the concept of inheritance, okay, it is technically useless. You create a class and then you put pass inside it, then yeah, might as well don't need this class, right? But yeah, just to show you guys the concept of inheritance. So next shape is triangle, right? Plus triangle. Okay, so triangle is also a shape, so it is going to be inheriting the shape. Okay, so what is the difference between
I want to ask why my one is invalid syntax.
for which one?
For the example, the first one, the class shape there. Yeah, I don't know why I get a syntax error.
Let me copy it off. Let me copy this whole cell for you.
Yes, thank you.
Where's the copy here? Oh, it's here. I mean, in your class definition, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. You can try copy and pasting that thing. Right, so next up we have the triangle. Okay, so the only difference of triangle with other shapes is the way to calculate the area. Okay, so as we already know from just now, we can override methods. Okay, how do we? Oops. Right. So how do we override method is by just writing a function with the same name. Right? So def area taking self. Right. How do we actually calculate the area of rectangle. So it is just, oh no, just return self dot width multiply with self dot height over 2. Right, so it's half time base time height. So it's basically the same thing as width and height, right? So for triangle is done. There's no other thing. Okay, for circle, right? Plus circle. So circle is the shape, so it should be inheriting from shape as well. Obviously, the formula to calculate area of a circle is the most weird one since it involves pi, okay, a constant. So in this case, we are going to use 3.142 as pi, right? So let's override the same function area, right? Instead of returning width and height, we are going to use either one of those value. Okay, since a circle don't have the width, okay, it only has the circumference and the diameter, right? So if you think about it, the diameter is the height, okay? Then for us to get radius is just height over 2, right? So what we can do is just take return self dot height over 2. So this one is our r, this one is our radius, and then the formula to calculate area is actually pi times r times square. Okay, so the order does not actually matter, but then yeah, pi is 3.142 multiply with self dot height over 2. Okay, and then we need this thing in parentheses to be power of 2. Okay, how do we raise something to power of 2 in Python? Is by using the 2 asterisk. Okay, so if we have like a asterisk asterisk 2, so this is similar to a power of 2. A power of 2, right? So it's just an operator in Python. So raise something to the power of another thing. So in this case, we want the r to be squared, so power of 2. So you can just do something like this. So pi times r times pi times r squared, or you can just write the same thing over here. So self dot height over 2, right? Yeah. But the most neat way is to write something like this. So r squared times pi. So once we are done, so we have now 3 classes that inherits the parent class shape. So now let's try creating object of all of them. So first one, let's create rectangle. So r1 equals to r1, just r equals to rectangle. Okay, so remember back, we need to pass in 2 things as the argument. We need to pass in width and we need to pass in height. So the width, let's just put 20 and 5. Okay. So we have the area function. So r dot area. Okay, can print it out. It's just 20 times 5. Next up is triangle. So key equals to triangle. Also, we need to provide 2 things, width and height. So we can just give some width and height, right? And then can print out the area, t dot area. So we can get 25.0. Okay. Some of you might ask or might wonder why suddenly there's a floating point, although we pass in integer. It's because division in like normal division, just this forward slash, okay, is not an integer division. So if it's not an integer division, that means it can have floating points. So if you really want to strictly do integer division, so in Python, like let's say you want to 5 divided by 10, right? So you get 0.5. But let's say you want to strictly do integer division, so 5 double forward slash. So in this case, you will get 0. Okay? Because it will round down to the closest integer, round down to closest integer, right? So that's why here the output is 25.0 instead of just 25. Then next up, triangle, then we have circle, right? So let's create another one. C equals to symbol of, okay. Notice that we don't actually use the width in here, okay, since we ourselves define that the R is equals to height over 2. So technically, we can just put any number in the width and we actually give the height. We only give the height, okay? So C dot area. Okay, although the width here is 0, but that doesn't really matter because we are not using the width also in calculating the area. But in Python, if you are not using any values, okay, let's say when you are calculating something, then the values you will not be using, okay. You are basically saying that you won't be using the value anymore after you have defined it somewhere. Then you can just put an underscore there. Right, it's a bit weird, I know, but then you just put underscore, right? Underscore, comma, 10, right? So it won't affect anything. Yeah, but you cannot do something like this. You cannot just leave it blank and then put a comma and then pass in the second variable. Yeah, this one will give out error, okay? Because you cannot suddenly have a comma right at the start of when you're passing in parameters. So you need to have something. So that something is either you can put 0 or you can just put an underscore, right? Okay, so yeah, that's OOP basically in Python. Basically, there are a lot more, but I'm just covering the basic of it. Okay. And also, if you scroll more down, okay, you scroll down, you should see there are 3 questions. Okay, so these questions are for you guys to like go on your own and explore. Okay, the first 2 questions are really direct and easy. The last question is a bit challenging. Okay, not challenging, but then as long as you know the basic idea of what have been discussed today, then you should know how to do this. And also there's a part that say that you need to fetch the data from the URL. So this thing is where, okay, so basically let me show what's in this link. So this link is basically a JSON. JSON is a JavaScript object notation. Okay, it's a JavaScript object. Not JavaScript object. It's an object written in a JavaScript notation. JavaScript object notation. Okay, and your job is to fetch this data from this URL. Okay, and once again, and you have to store it in the pandas data frame, right? Once you have it stored in the pandas data frame, you should only print out all the data that has the completed task equals to true. Okay, if you can see here, the completed, there's a key value pairs of completed true, completed false. Okay, so your task is to only print the completed true. Print out the user ID, title, and completed true only, right? And if you guys have any problem in doing this, then be sure to reach us at the reach out to us at the Discord channel, right? So yeah, I'm done with my part. So now I'll let Sira to continue with the Flask, right?
Okay, can you guys hear me? Hello? Just, okay, can you? Okay, nice. Okay, so let's go over the basics of Flask for today. So tomorrow morning we'll build the bulk of the app, but today we're just going to be going over the basics of Flask. I'm going to be introducing to you how the skeleton works. So I'm assuming that everyone has the skeleton installed already, right? I mean, the code downloaded this morning from the GitHub repo. Or has anyone not installed it yet? Yeah, you already have it downloaded. Okay, nice. So let me just share my screen. Let's go over a few things. So you have the so your introduction to Flask right here, and then you have app.py. App.py, then there's a templates folder with all the HTML files, and then there's a static folder along with Flask session, and then there'll be a folder called PyCache. Can you guys see all this in your directory right now? Is it visible? It's visible, right? Yeah, you guys can see it. Okay, nice. Okay. So we have multiple files here. Now I want you to go to your app.py file and have a look at this. And then I will go over what each one means before introducing what Flask actually is. Right, so we start with importing a bunch of modules, initializing the Flask app, and then defining a bunch of routes. Don't worry at all if you don't understand right now. Just have a look at the code first, see what you can make of it, then I'll go step by step. Okay, so explore the thing first. Maybe take like 2 minutes to explore what the folders are and how they come together and who's importing who. Okay. So while you're doing that, let me just go over what Flask is. So typically, right, so far what Daniel has really taught you is mainly the very much the statistical parts of Python, where you are learning how to use Python functions, Python classes, learning the syntax of Python. But the question you're probably asking now is, how do we apply this? What are the applications of Python? And since Python is actually so easy to learn, and it's dynamically typed, and it's one of the most popular languages in the world, it actually has a bunch of practical applications. So you can automate stuff using Python. You can write a bunch of Python scripts to automate pretty much anything on your computer. Like you can wake up in the morning and then you can write a Python script to open up all the programs that you use throughout the day. You can make a Python script to log into your MMLS and take your attendance for you. You can also do that. You can write a Python script to scrape Twitter. You can write a Python script to log into your Twitter account and then scrape out all the tweets. You can use web scraping to attack Lazada. Maybe you want to go grab the latest prices on Lazada. You can write a web scraper using Python to log into your Lazada account and then grab out everything you need. So automate pretty much anything using Python. Then there's the popular one, data analysis. So most of you who are doing an AI degree or a data science degree, there's a very high chance that you're learning Python as one of your main languages because, as Daniel introduced just now, packages such as NumPy and Pandas are very, very powerful for statistical data analysis. So you can do a lot of numerical processing, analyze data, show interesting graphs using Python. And then the more complex aspects of Python, you can do computer vision. You can process images using OpenCV. That's a very popular package for image processing. You can build deep neural networks using TensorFlow or PyTorch for computer vision. You can also process text using Python, do sentiment analysis. You can process large amounts of text using Python, and we call it natural language processing. And there are a bunch of libraries for NLP. And then what we're going to be looking at today is actually the web development aspect of Python using packages such as Flask and Django. So let's go over the... Wait, can you guys still hear me, right? Okay, I can be heard. Yeah, okay. Just a bit worried because my mic is a bit off. Yeah. So let's just go over Flask. So what is Flask, right? You guys probably have Googled it by now. It's actually, you can build microservices using Flask. And you can actually build web applications using Flask, just Flask alone. And the entire Flask ecosystem is just one package. So if you want to run Flask, you just type pip install Flask on your command line, and then you'll get the entire Flask framework for you to build any web app you want. Okay. So going forward from here, we're gonna, this is after, yeah. So Flask can either be just on the backend where you can serve the data from your backend to your front end, or you can build the entire web app using just Flask alone. So for today, we're going to be building the entire web app using Flask alone. Yep. Okay, so let me just go over the basics of front end and back end. People don't understand. Let me jump out for this. Okay, so how many of you know what HTML and CSS is? Let me just make a poll for this. So do I need to go over the basics of web development? I have learned HTML and CSS before. Yes, no. Can you guys vote in the poll to indicate whether you've learned HTML and CSS before? Six, okay. Yeah, since there's a considerable amount of people that haven't done web development before, I'm going to go over the basics of the web first, okay, before we move into Flask. So, for example, let's say this is my homepage. This is google.com. This is google.com. So whenever I type into my web page, google.com, I'm getting this page right here, which is sent to me from Google servers. So every time I type in google.com, Google is sending me back this page. So this is Google servers, and they are sending me back, and they are sending to my computer the phrase google.com. So this is the Google homepage, right? So you have the search bar there. Doesn't look very nice, but that's the homepage. So every time I go to my browser and I search google.com, Google is actually sending me this page right here. So I type google.com, I get this page right here. So this is what I call the front end. This page right here is what we call the front end. So this is the front end. Let me just box. This is my front end. And we make another one, and this is google.com. The front end is what the user sees, what the user sees. Okay, so let's say I go to another site, let's say I go to lazada.com. The page I get is beautiful colors and all the graphics. I think it's not my level. Yeah, so all these graphics I get, right? All these graphics, all the or everything on the page is what I consider the front end. This is what the user sees. What the user sees is called the front end. So let's say I'm in google.com now, and I want to search for something. I want to search for pictures of cats, for example. So I search here, pictures of cats. And I'm searching. So now Google will put it inside. I'm working very hard to make this aesthetic. So pictures of cats. So now once I ask Google for pictures of cats, Google will send a message to its servers. It send a message to the server asking, okay, this guy, hello server, please give me pictures of cats. Please give me pictures of cats. So the front end will send a request to the back end. This becomes the back end now. Just make a new text box for this. And just make it normal sized. And this becomes our back end. Right? The front end, the back end is the also known as the server. What goes on behind the scenes. So the front end is what the user sees, and the back end is what goes on behind the scenes. Basically the server. So when you ask the front end for pictures of cats, the front end is just a page. The front end is just design, right? It does not actually know what cats are. It does not know what pictures are. It just knows that the user wants to see pictures of cats. So it sends this query phrase back to the server. So the server does all the processing. The server does the thinking. The server queries the database. The server will go and search for pictures of cats now. And then it gets a bunch of, we can actually find a picture of a cat. I don't know. For example, this picture of a cat. So So now that the server found a picture of a cat, it's going to send it back to the front end. So now there's going to be a line drawn back to the front end, and we make a new search page with the results of the cat, picture of the cats. Just copy this over. So the front end makes the request. The backend is the server. The server goes and searches for pictures of cats. The server will go and search, compile, collate, process everything, and then it prepares a picture of the cat and just sends it back to the front end for the user to see. So every time I type something inside Google, a lot of things are actually going on behind the scenes. Okay, so it's not just the front end does all the work. So a web application that actually fully works is made up of the front end and the back end. One can't function or the other. If it's just the front end, nothing will work. Right? Just everything is just designed. And the back end, without the back end, there won't be any functionality because all the logic actually goes on inside the back end. So a full stack web application, what we call a full stack web application, That's very big. Okay, but yeah, a full stack web application includes both the front end and the back end. So Flask can either be used just for the back end. You can just create a server that just sends back information and asks for the information. So you can use Flask to build a server that says, okay, fine. If the user asks me for pictures of cats, I will send back pictures of cats. You can build a server that just does that. Or you can also create the front end and render the page using the server. So Flask can be used to make both the front end and the back end, or just the back end. And for our use case, we're going to be doing both the front end and the back end, just using Python Flask. Okay, so how many of you are confused with how the front end and back end works? Let me just make a poll. I understand. Everything text. Understand how the front end and back end works. Yes. No. You guys can go and vote and see. I mean, if you're confused here, please ask, and this is a very important concept. Because later when we're actually building the Python app, you'll get very confused if you don't understand how the front end and back end works. Okay, so most people say that they understand, so I'm going to assume that the front end and back end is, okay, one person said no. Okay, what's the query? Just type it inside the chat, maybe I can answer. Any questions? Yeah, two people said they don't understand. So what exactly do you not understand about it? Maybe we're shy to ask him, maybe we can ask in Discord. Okay, fine. So the majority of you say you understand. So let's move on to last. Okay. Yeah, good question. Yes, for front end dev back. Okay, yeah. Let me talk a bit about that. Yes. Okay. Yeah, since you're interested, let's talk about that. So basically, the guy who builds the design, the guy who builds Lazada.com, the guy who designs it, puts all the colors, he is what we call the, as Navesh mentioned, he's called the front-end developer. The front-end developer makes this page. The front-end developer is in charge of making the page look nice. Okay, it's his job to make sure that all the typography is nice, all the colors are nice, everything. The page is responsive to different. It's not responsive. It's his job to make sure that all the slideshows work. That's his job. And then the backend developer is the one in charge of making sure that the search works, for example. Let's say I said the USB hub, right? The backend developer is the one responsible for making sure I get all the relevant results only. Let's say I search for USB hub and I get back pictures of t-shirts. Then the backend developer, he screwed up. He made a mistake because the front end is querying the backend for USB hub, but the backend is sending back pictures of t-shirts instead. So the backend developer makes sure that the functionality works, and the front end developer makes sure that the page looks nice. So a developer that can do both front end and back end is called the, someone guess, someone guess. Someone who can do both front end and back end is called a, Daniel, what's it called? Not media developer, no. Both end, no, not both end. Full stack, yes. Full stack developer. A full stack developer can do both front end and back end. So the full stack developer is like the high piece. They can do everything. They can do front end, they can do back end, they can do database, they can do DevOps. Yeah, these people can do pretty much anything like full stack developers. They do both the front end and the back end, and they also manage the database. Yes. Okay, so that's the logic behind. Yeah, that's basically that's just the web development. There's front end, back end, and there's database. Let me just go over to database quickly. So we talk about back end, right? So back end. Okay, that's very big. Subtitle maybe. Back end. So let's go back to the pictures of cat example. So let's have a SQL database. Okay, I'll just database just to be quite common about it. The database here, there's a backend here. Let's assume that this is Google servers. This is Google server. Google server. Now let's make like a swimming diagram here. So the front end, let's make a request. I want pictures of cats. I want pictures of cats. Okay. It sends a request to the backend. For front end to backend, it says that I want pictures of cats. Just to send it. Okay. So now the front end can just ask, I want pictures of cats, or you can even make it like query, like dictionary, maybe like a dictionary, saying that query is pictures of cats. And the backend, what it will do is it probably say something like, we're doing SQL, for example, select all from database from pictures where title is equal to cat. For example, those of you who know SQL, you don't know what an SQL statement looks like. So a front end asks the backend, I want pictures of cats. And the backend converts this language into a database specific language and only looks for pictures of cats. Then database will send back the pictures and then what the backend will do, the backend will process it nicely. Okay, to organize it, organize all the files, organize all the images, sort it, etc. Send back raw data. Then the backend will do some processing, post processing, to filter, sort, do all the necessary things, and you'll get a very nice, just a very nice consumable object for the front end to use. Then the front end shows the user. So the front end, back end, and database, they work in tandem. They work in tandem to make an entire web application work. Even if one of these fails, the entire thing won't work. But obviously, Google server is not as simple as this. It's not just one SQL statement. It's a very complex process, but just trying to put this at a very high level of abstraction, then you have front-end, back-end database. So full stack developer works on both front-end, back-end, and database. Then there's specific roles for each one. So you can have front-end developer. They use stuff like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React.js, Vue.js, all these JavaScript frameworks, so on. These are all the stack that he uses. And the backend developer uses stuff like PHP, Laravel, PHP, Node.js, Ruby on Rails, and database uses something like PostgreSQL, database administrator. So it uses something like PostgreSQL, MySQL, PostgreSQL. For some of you who took database fundamentals, IBM DB2, then there's MongoDB, NoSQL, and so on. So if you know one stack here, one from front end, one from back end, one from database, and you know how to build an app that uses all three concurrently, then you can already call yourself a full stack developer. And what Flask allows you to do is basically do both front end and back end together in one single application. And you can also connect Flask, let's say both front end and back end are running in Flask. You can also connect Flask to a database. You can either choose one of MySQL, Postgres, and so on, and actually grab data from the database straight away. But for our course today and tomorrow, we're only going to be looking at the back end and front end. We're going to assume that there's no database because it's too complicated for now. Okay, so anyone confused so far? Okay, right, the understanding of front-end, back-end database. All good? Okay, nice. Okay. So let's go ahead and set up Flask. Okay, so let's open up Flask here, and I want you guys to go to a file called requirements.txt. Go to a file called requirements.txt, and then I want you to have a look at these requirements here. So we have a few packages that we're using. Very important ones are that we need to be able to run Flask. So there's Flask itself, there's Jinja 2, and there's a few other dependencies of Flask and Jinja 2. So in order for you to use this, I want you to go to your terminal here. Open a terminal at this folder. Open a terminal at wherever you've saved it. For example, I've saved it here, right? Introduction to Flask. Open a terminal here. If you're using Windows, then you just need to type. I think on Windows you can just type CMD on the taskbar up here. Just type CMD, and then it will open up a terminal at this particular folder. I want you guys to type pip3, pip install. Give me a second. Pip install requirements. Yeah, pip install R. Sorry, pip install R requirements.txt. I want you guys to go to the folder there, click this file, and I want you to type this inside your command line to install Flask successfully. So make sure you open a terminal only at that particular folder. Right? Open a terminal only at that folder, only inside introduction to Flask, and then run this command pip install requirements.txt. So I'm going to open a poll. Have you installed the requirements? Done. Doing error. It's just photo, depending on whether you're done doing this an error. Everyone's tired. Only 4 people now. You're doing fine. I'll just give you guys a minute for that.
Just download the Flux only, right?
Yeah. Okay, technically I suggest you just require and download the entire requirements of txt because all this is important. Install pip install R requirements of txt. So yeah, just another interesting thing for those of you who want to know what is this file requirements of txt. So for example, let's say I am developing a project on my computer, and I am using Mac, for example, and my friend is using a Linux computer, and my other friend is using a Windows computer. So in all our computers, we have a different Python environment installed. So I might have Flask, for example, but my friend doesn't have Flask. My other friend might not have a certain package. So all of us have different packages installed on our own Python environment. So to ensure that everyone who's running my project is able to run it successfully with all the dependencies that I'm using, we have to be able to tell people, okay, I am using this package and I'm using this version of this package. For example, let's say I did my app inside Python 1.0, for example, or Flask 1.0. But in my friend's local computer, his Flask version is 2.0. So if I'm using 1.0, he's using 2.0. When he's running my project, he'll get a bunch of errors because a lot of things are already outdated or deprecated or something. So to ensure that he can run my project the same way that I ran my project, he needs to have the exact same version of every package that I was using. And to tell him this information, I have to create this file called requirements.txt. If you guys have written JavaScript before, that something similar is called package.json. It lists all the different dependencies of my project along with their versions. So the more packages I'm using, the bigger this list will get. And if you want to generate this thing, it's just a matter of pip freeze, which is the command to create this file. I don't need to run it, I don't need to run it, but just for your information. Pip freeze. Don't run it. If you want to create the file, then you have to run the requirements of txt pip freeze. Okay, so let me go to code. Okay, error. What's the error? Is Daniel there? Daniel, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yep.
Okay, yeah, take them for help them with the error. I think Daniel has a separate room. Yeah, use this room. Let me give you the link for this. Just mute this tab. Okay. Okay, now considering that most of you have already installed, I'm assuming. Okay, let's go to running this thing. Now, since the requirements are installed, and you have already app.py here, inside the terminal, I want you to just to check how many of you are using Mac and how many are using Windows. OS, Windows, Mac, Linux. Because the next step depends on what you're using. You guys vote for the OS, Windows, Mac, Linux. Linux, 1% Linux. Okay, I think majority using Windows are, so don't run the next thing. Don't run this. Just for me to run, Because I'm using something called a virtual environment. We need to set this up separately, so don't run the work. It won't work for you. Okay. So now, considering you already installed the pip install requirements, I need you to set the dependencies here. Set the dependencies. Run these two. One by one, run this inside your thing. Inside the Flask folder itself, I want you to type export. Export Flask app. Underscore app is equal to app. Okay. Next one, export Flask env is equal to development. Both of these should run without error. If error, let me know this. Make sure you're inside the Flask folder and then run the two export commands, export Flask app and export Flask env. Are you able to run or? Maybe if you're able to run these two commands, maybe let me know. If not, I will go over. Let's debug a bit, see what went wrong. Run a terminal. Yes, run a terminal. Yes, terminal, and make sure the part the terminal is introduction to Flask is very important. It has to be in the exact same place that your code is there. Export is not okay. Fine, I expected this. Okay, set set. Yeah, yes, try set. If you're using Windows, try set. So using export, use try set Flask app is equal to app. Is set working for you? Done. Okay, nice. Okay, and do the same thing for set Flask env. Yeah, it depends on operating system. Everything changes depending on the operating system. Flask env is equal to development. If you're using a Mac or a Linux, then you can use export. If you're using Windows, you must use set. I think, yeah. Okay, considering that this works. Yeah, by the way, both Daniel and Sean are both on voice calls, one on Discord and one on the other channel here. So if you guys have any specific or big errors going on, you guys can go there and ask them. They'll help you debug exactly what went wrong. So considering these two are there, now the moment of truth. I want you guys to try and run. Okay, sure. I want you guys to try and run Flask run. Okay, just that Flask run. And I want you to go to this link 127, whatever this is or whatever it says, and you should see a type error. Yeah, our code is empty now, so I need you guys to go. Do you see type error or not? I know it's a good sign not to see an error, but in this case, seeing the error is a good sign. So if you can type Flask run, go to the running on, go to this site here, and then you see the type error, which means that you're on the right track. So how many of you see type error? Okay, how many of you see the do you see the can you access the web page fast? Okay, Daniel, maybe go to Daniel's room. You have the teacher install Flask. Yeah, I mean, install the requirements. If you install the requirements file, then you get all the requirements, including Flask. So can you access the web page from Flask run? Yes or no? Should see a type error. Okay, no. More people saying no. Okay, well, let's see. What's the issue? What's the error you're seeing? I mean, So the three of you who said that you can't see the web page, can I see the error? Or what to after Pip install? Okay, let me go over that again. So are you using Windows or Mac? Using Windows, right? Windows, okay, fine. I want you to run these two commands now. Set Flask app. Let's equal to app, and the other one is Flask env. Set Flask env is equal to development. I want you to run these two commands inside your terminal or your command prompt, and make sure that your command prompt is set inside the Flask folder. It must be inside introduction to Flask. Yeah, run already. Now I want you to run Flask run. After you do this, you just write Flask run. Flask run. What do you see after typing Flask run? Do you see the serving? You see serving Flask app. Or you don't see it. Or what does it say? What's the other message? It says the term Flask is not recognized. Okay. Not, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Totally fine. That's fine. Even I have it, I think. Yeah. Yeah, don't worry about that. That's just a warning. Can you see the running on? Search for running on. Look for this line running on something. Look for the line and then find the URL and go click on the URL. Yeah. Click on URL and you should be able to see the type error. If you see something on the page already, it's a good sign, right? It means that everything is set up properly. As long as you see something on the page, it's already fine. Actually, Flask actually dumps a lot of like random exceptions and warnings here. Just ignore everything. Only look for running on. That's all that matters. Okay, Zikai, Flask is not recognized. Okay. Did you first run the export Flask app? Did you run these two? Export or set? Did you run these two? Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Don't worry about that. Yeah, it's supposed to be like that. Don't worry. Yes, it's supposed to be internal server error. Do you see the space type error? Or do you see internal server error? There's two things. Internal server error means you see nothing on the page. You just see like a Chrome error message. And the other one is type error. This means that it's working. This is run by Flask. But if you see internal server error, for example, let's say I go the same thing, doing 6,000 maybe. Do you see this or do you see this? If you're seeing type error, it's a good thing. If you're seeing this, then something is wrong. You see this side can't be reached, or are you seeing type error? You see internal server error, either one. In your terminal, do you see the running on? Do you see this line here? Running on something? Go search and see. Yes, you see, right? Okay. And when you click on it, you see internal server error. Is this a Chrome message or is it a Flask message? Do you see it in this font? Or do you see it in this font? The Chrome font or the Flask font? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please tell me. Yeah.
Okay. I saw the running on, and then I click on it. Then it shows internal server error. Like then the server encountered an internal error and was unable to complete your request. Either the server is overloaded or there is an error in the application. Yeah.
Did you install Flask already? The pip install Flask. Did you run the install requirements of the XC?
Yes.
And Okay, if you look through your error messages here, do you see an error saying that no module called Flask?
No.
Have a look through the errors. You don't see it. The only error you should see is type error. The view function for index and non-return a valid response. You don't see any of the module import didn't work, this didn't work, that didn't work, right? You only see
No.
this error here.
I saw type error, yeah, the same as yours.
Okay, can I see your screen? Can I see your? Yeah, stop presenting this. Yeah, we're using Windows here as one home set. Yeah, export set. Maybe Zed, you can share your screen. I can see. Development server. Okay. And go to the page. Go to the page. View function return error index. Yeah, all good, all good, all good. Yeah, it's all good. Nothing wrong because the only reason is if you want to fix the error now, I tell you want to fix the error. If you go to your just okay. I'll tell you how to fix the error right now. So you won't see type error also. So look at my screen now.
Okay.
Yeah, don't worry. Everything is recorded. Nothing is recording. Okay, so you see my screen. Go to app.py and in def index right here, I want everyone to change the pass to return hello world. I want you to change the def index function to return hello world. If you do this now, the type error also will disappear. If you save the thing and then refresh the page, now you see hello world here. By right, you should no longer see internal server error. Does it work? Just change the def index. The def index here, change the pass to print return hello world. Return hello world. Copy my code there. The def index. How many of you guys can see hello world? If yes, just type Y. If no, type N. Done. Okay, you can see hello world. Nice. Who can see hello world?
Can you show again for the make the hello world part?
Yeah. You can see my screen. Yeah, just copy here. So just change the def index from pass to return hello world.
How to run the application? I just
Flask run. Flask run. This one. Wei Jun, did you replace it with hello world? Yeah, no, we will release the recording after things over. It's still recording now. Yeah. After today's session, we will release the recording. You can't see hello world.
need to type the Flask run in the comment.
Terminal. Yeah. No, stop it. Just type Flask run. And then you go to this link. It says here. You should see hello world. Considering everything is good. Okay, nice. Yeah, nice. Okay. Wei Jun still see error, or did you already manage to get hello world? So you see, still error. Wait, maybe share your screen. I want to see. Stop presenting this.
I still get the development error in the PowerShell there.
What's whatever?
I typing in the PowerShell there for Flask run, and then it's like development server did not use it in the production
Yeah,
deploy.
that's just the warning. That's just the warning. Yeah, guys, ignore the warnings. If it says warning, development server, don't use in deployment, that's totally fine. That's just the warning.
Oh yeah, but I did not go to the don't go to the web page that for the Hello World.
Maybe share your screen, I can see.
Can. So now this one is the PowerShell correct or not? If this one.
No, I told you to open the terminal inside the folder with the Flask. So
Oh,
go to
using
your File Explorer. Yeah, go to your File Explorer, and then
Oh.
open a CMD. Yeah, open a CMD. Go to open introduction to Flask first. Type CMD at the top there.
this one.
No, open a terminal. Open a command prompt at this folder. Inside this folder, open a command prompt. Yeah.
Okay, and then open the CMD.
Yeah, open a CMD. No. Okay. Close this window. Close the window. Okay, now do you see the Python Study Jam introduction to Flask in the top bar there?
This one, yes.
Click. Okay, go a bit to the right. Move your cursor a bit to the right.
This one.
You just click the empty space in the top bar. Yeah, click it. Just normal
Okay.
click, and then type CMD. Type CMD. Just type
CMD.
CMD. Enter. Yes. Okay. Now type set. Let me read it commands. Set Flask CMD.
Fun.
Yeah, type these two commands. Type these two. No. Set Flask app is equal to app. And Flask. Yeah, type these two.
Like this.
Yes. Set Flask env is equal to development. App.py code I will make. Set. Yep. Okay. And now I want you to type Flask run. Flask run. Space run here. Import error was raised. You don't have Flask. Wait, no. No. App and import error was raised. Can you open your app.py? Open your app.py.
Which
file.
one?
Yeah, go to your VS Code or open
This one.
Open that file. Yeah, open it. Open VS Code. Yeah, open inside VS Code.
You open it. This one.
Yes. Open it. Yes. Okay. And now let's go. If you're returning hello world, app is equal to Flask. Okay, importing app. Paste.
So I need to run again.
Yeah, try running Flask. Use small case F Flask. No, it doesn't need to be app.py. This is the app. It knows whether the app Flask one. Yeah, just okay. I try. Set Flask app is app.py. I don't think it'll work out, but it's just fine. The command you just put down there. Let's go down there. This. Go to the meet chat. Go to the no. Leave this one. I'm going to save it first.
Need to save this first,
Yeah, save the file. Yes, save the file. Yes. I'll go back to the Google Meet chat. And,
yeah.
Yeah, and then take the one that Joming put.
This one.
Yes. And yes, run. Okay, now try Flask run again. that didn't help. Okay. What's the issue? Can you open your Introduction to Flask? Go to your File Explorer. Go to File Explorer and open the Introduction to Flask folder.
Okay.
Go to Introduction to Flask.
The
Wherever
Flask,
that's located. Yeah, that one. Yes.
this one.
Go to Introduction to Flask. This one, yes. Open it. You see the stuff inside, right? App, static requirements. Did you already run the pip install requirements?
Need to reopen this one.
No, did you run the pip install requirements.txt?
Not sure.
Maybe run that again, just to be safe. Pip install run this command again. Change the whole thing to CMD.
Is
No, go inside Flask. You have to go inside Flask folder. Inside
Flask
the File
folder.
Explorer itself. Yes.
This one.
Go inside Flask. Go inside Introduction to Flask, and then
Yes.
open CMD here. Open a CMD here.
Static.
Not import. Open on it. No. Just type CMD on top there. CMD. Yes. Okay. Now pip install al.
And then this one.
No. Pip install this one.
This.
No, the one I just put pip install al. Yes. Okay. Now I need you to
No.
set the try Flask run now. Let's try Flask run. Run Flask. Still working.
Error.
Maybe after the session, maybe I will get and call with you. Or Daniel, can you help him out? Daniel, you there? Can you maybe join the Zoom? Daniel will help you debug.
Okay. Can.
Yeah, just join the Zoom. Okay, let me just. So for the rest of you, I think some of you are having issues with installing Flask. It's totally normal. And Flask is still the same. Do not import development when I Flask run. Did you run the set? You run this one? If you haven't run this, then you'll probably get an error then. So those of you who have, can you access the web page? The final vote, how many of you can actually access the web page? How many of you can't? So if yes, just vote yes. If no, vote no. Because everyone has different error messages that we have to go one by one and check. Okay, I have to debug on that. Okay. 7 people yes, 6 people no. Okay, 8 people yes, 7 people no. Okay, so a big majority is yet. Okay. So Daniel is running one section. Sean is running. So in the Discord server, I will get Sean to Sean here. Sean already left the session. Okay, I think he's in the Discord server. Okay. In that case, maybe you share your screen. I can see. Try to debug on that one. So actually, we'll stop here for today. We'll stop here for today, and then any of you who have errors to set up Flask, please set it up now. The rest of you who are okay, everything's working, you are able to access the Hello World webpage, you guys can leave early and come back tomorrow at 10 a.m. in the morning. Then we actually build the app. So before coming tomorrow morning, please ensure that you have Flask working and all your error messages are already resolved. So those of you who still have errors, please stay back. And the rest of you, see you guys tomorrow morning. Yep. So any errors you have, please resolve them now. The rest of you, thank you. Yeah. Okay. See you tomorrow. Bye. Have a good evening. Sure. Okay, Wei-Jun, maybe you share your screen. Let's settle this. We can rush already. No problem. So those of you who are still here, I'm assuming that you guys have some sort of error or you got lost at some point. So let's resolve one by one. If anyone has an error message they want us to debug, you guys can just start sharing your screen and we can check. Okay, bye-bye. Guys, anyone here has errors? No. Okay. Things running fine then. Yeah. Okay. In that case, since no one has any errors, I will end this call today. That is about it.